Welcome back from that. Now we're moving on now to discuss food. Since the end of the fuel subsidy regime, Nigerians seem to be growing, and their harrowing experiences that they're facing. Today, earlier in this program, we watched Nigerians trekking from their homes to their workplaces. But today we'll be talking about food security. Although the government had announced that they had called for a state of emergency in food security, what is the FCT doing? What indeed would work for Nigerians? We're appraising federal government's food plan, and to do all of that is our guest, who was an irregular guest. I'm not sure why he stayed away, but we'll get to all of that. He's the president, Young Farmers Network. Promise Amaha, is fantastic to have you join us.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Whatever happened to us? You were irregular.
Nothing happened.
Is it the Tinubu government that was not
favorable? We went through a transition. Everybody knew we went through a transition, so we're trying to adjust to the new realities.
To think we're hitting the ground running. But
Sure.
But again, thank you for being part of the program. Food insecurity. What is indeed necessary to get us there?
Food insecurity or food security?
Food security, I apologize. Food security, rather.
You know, I've summarized our strategy at our organizational level to be called a STEP strategy. And it's actually a strategy that factors in what the gaps in the current food security situation across the country is. And for the past 20 years, we've analyzed what are the challenges to food security in Nigeria. Why can a country that has millions of hectares of arable land,
Right.
very young, vibrant population, not be able to meet up with their food, security needs or their food needs? And we found out that three critical elements summarized that our STEP strategy was missing, and that's sensitization is for the S. So our work analyzing the gaps for the past 20 years exposed the lack of knowledge, stakeholder knowledge on what modern agriculture is about. You can't feed such a growing population, a rapidly growing population, with traditional agriculture, and you go into the communities and you see young people and you see old people still carrying out agriculture with cutlasses and hoes and the traditional. So it's not possible. It's not realistic. Look at how much we are. We're 200 million plus people and counting, and this population is rapidly growing. Before noon today, about 60,000, it's estimated about 60,000 more new Nigerians will be introduced into Nigeria.
Exactly.
So that's about the economic estimate about what our rapidly growing population rate looks like. And you can't do that with traditional agriculture. So sensitization is very, very key.
Sensitization for who? Amaha, when
For
I listen to agricultural experts such as yourself, we talk about how we can go mechanizing our farmlands just to attract especially this young population back into the job markets, for instance. And my question is, why are we not seeing private sector lead the chart, engagement in this? Are they the ones who need the sensitization?
So the question you ask is very, very, very critical. So the sensitization is for critical stakeholders. And these critical stakeholders come from bottom top. So we have the last mile, who are community stakeholders that are looking at the young people at community level, the women who occupy 75% of local production or in food production, labor in food production, the traditional rulers and district heads. So there's a last mile stakeholder layer, which is the community level. And then you scale that up to, subnational level, where you have the subnational policy makers, subnational executive arms, government, the public sector, and the private sector, to the national level. So this sensitization has to be a concentrated and consistent engagement across the critical layers, because these things, everybody in this stakeholder mix I've mentioned, determines whatever happens, eventually in our food security plan, or the output of our food security, or what we see.
Right.
And I'll give you critical examples. Government, yes, really doesn't have any business in business, but government policies can either make or mar, our food security target and food security plan, because, they decide on what policies and frameworks that will work, and then it trickles down. Everybody across that stakeholder chain I've just mentioned becomes, a victim or a victor of the government policies and stakeholders. So the knowledge and understanding of the stakeholders at the public sector level is critical to determine the output of what you find in our food security means and how they impact on the community level.
Exactly.
So you see, so you have the public sector, you have the organized private sector, and you also have the community level layers, because you find out that one of the poorest things that we experience in Nigerian agriculture is the lack of sustainable and efficient extension workers. So everywhere in the world, food security is guaranteed by these extension service providers, extension service workers. They are the people that help the rural farmer understand the dynamics in climate change, best practices and what to do, facilitate access to market, facilitate access to mechanization. They play a very fundamental role. And it's our understanding that a thinking government will realize that if they have the proper enlightenment and knowledge of these gaps, that only on extension management in Nigerian agriculture provides millions of jobs for young people who are unemployed across the country. So let me just state to the fact, sensitization in the case I'm trying to emphasize is a bottom-top approach from community level critical stakeholders to public level stakeholders, then, of course, being driven by the organized private sector, which is critical because government has the level of investments made in agricultural development and for food security is done by private sector. Literally, they are the people that understand that these are the gaps and these are the needs. This is where you have to focus and you have your return on investment guaranteed.
Right.
Where you now start thinking about agricultural insurance, the gaps in agricultural insurance, which is almost non-existent in the Nigerian agricultural agri-food sector. So that explains the sensitization part, right? So you understand now that the critical stakeholders from bottom top needs to be carried along on a massive sensitization and public enlightenment.
Be carried along by who? Because we're still waiting for the international organization to come to our rescue as usual.
So it's a marriage of convenience between the private sector and the public sector.
Right.
And also community leaders. And that's why we have traditional rulers. So there's an urgent need for government to initiate that action for a nationwide public enlightenment. This is so critical. I can't underestimate the need because we're trying to migrate Nigeria from a traditional agricultural society to a modern agriculture. And modern agriculture follows different patterns that we need to quickly transit to, right, to be able to meet with our food security needs.
Amaha, I don't know if you read through the state of emergency and the plan, the state of emergency on food security or insecurity. This time I'm beginning to get
the state of emergency on food
security.
On
food security,
yes,
rather.
Yes.
Now, are you as optimistic as a lot of Nigerians have expressed with the plan that the government seems to be churning out? I mean, 50 million fertilizers and the intervention for agricultural participants.
Well, so what I see in the emergency food security plan of the federal government is a government that just has to do what it has to do, right? There's a critical issue. Subsidy has been removed. There's a bandwagon effect across value chains because of subsidy removal, and you need to reinforce food security to avoid an imminent disaster. And the government says to itself, what we have to do immediately,
right,
as a stopgap, as a mitigation, is to declare an emergency on food security. I am following up closely to see how the implementation plan and the monitoring of that declaration of state of emergency is being managed
right,
and across which critical players that are going to manage it, because I have lived long enough and I've been over almost 20 years in this sector to realize that several governments who have attempted a knee-jerk food emergency on food security have done almost the similar thing. And similar thing, how do I mean by similar thing? Provide subsidized fertilizers to farmers, provide improved seedlings to them, and all of that. In the past, what you find out is that at the end of the day, political actors in this whole framing of state of emergencies just managed to migrate those inputs that were supposed to be used for empowering the local smallholder farmer to produce. You find those inputs in the open market. Political farmers hijack the process. The fertilizers are shared among themselves. The inputs are shared among themselves, and they go to resell it in the open market for a higher profit margin. And the critical demography or the targeted critical stakeholder that is supposed to have access to that does not have access to them. They don't have any access to them. So it's hijacked at the level of political implementation, by the way. So it's the framing that I'm watching and paying close attention and also available to advise government.
But the intention is right in your words.
It is what needs to be done.
Right.
You know, people are dying of hunger and poverty is increasing. So as a stopgap, like I said, there has to be a state of emergency. What now follows is the framing of the state of emergency, how the why is established, the how, you know, is what is all needs to be focused on.
If you have to suggest as to the how that would really impact, what would it be?
Because it would be a concerted public-private partnership, taking out public sector actors from the implementation and having them play a more of a regulatory monitoring and enforcement role to see that the targeted audience and beneficiary for this emergency actually get direct access to it with several layers of enforcement to ensure that their criminal punishment for criminal elements who would want to, as usual, infiltrate, the emergency intervention. So it has to be, a major. In fact, the private sector should drive this, if you ask me. But it also exposes one critical thing that is lacking in Nigeria across every economic divide: the absence of verifiable, reliable,
data.
and measurable data. So how do you reach out? How does the impact get felt when you don't even have verifiable data? The agricultural sector is the hardest hit with almost near non-existent data for anything of such. And implementation of such emergencies requires accurate data or near accurate data to be able to get the impact and results you can see. So you can feel it. The impact investment is, directly proportional to the expected outcomes.
Right.
Right. So when you have the absence of data in this case, so which data, for example, are you going to be using to implement the government state of emergency on food security? Which data? Data on mechanization, data on input, data on grains, data on the number of farmers. If you check the database of government registered farmers, you might likely say the register is even worse than that of the so-called social investment register that is in the front burner in the line of fire.
So what do we do? Is this a chicken or egg kind of matter?
No, so it's an emergency.
Because people are already dying.
So it's an emergency that something needs to be done on the immediate. So government has to find a way to mitigate the challenges of absence of verifiable data and work with the people that can reach the last mile, that understand the rural people and have a relationship with them.
Such as the Young Farmers Network, of course.
Well, you can say that again. But beyond that also, we have a collaboration with our traditional rulers. It's about time our traditional rulers should stop wearing their very fancy regalia and coming for meetings in Abuja and stuff like that. They should engage government directly and be part of the implementation, because every community is governed by a traditional ruler, and they're the most effective and powerful layers of leadership before you start talking about government forces. Do you understand? They are responsible for molding the behavior and character of their communities and engagement, direct access. They're the people that the community members see. The rural farmers know them.
Exactly.
So if traditional ruler by traditional ruler, region by region, they are mobilized to be part of this emergency food security plan in collaboration with, like you just said, the Nigerian Young Farmers Network. You start to see meaningful, engagement and investment, impact investment around achieving government goal on food security emergency. That's what you start to see.
I've listened to you really keenly, and unlike others, you did mention the security in major food bases of the country. Are you finding that a good reason to stay away from the farms?
Yeah, so it's a factor that affects everybody, but I hate the victim mentality. We're always used to always say, no, this and that. These people who are creating the insecurity, the bandits and the terrorists in the farms are also Nigerians. They're also people, like human beings like us. So if we keep looking at the problem, that's why I've heard mention about it. It's a very vital issue to say, okay, how do you achieve the goal of government on emergency food security?
Right.
But the government also rolled out mobilizing all security agencies to move in to flush out the bandits and the rest. But the challenge is not about flushing out bandits. The challenge should be about the soft approach to counter-terrorism and banditry, how to reorientate those segment of people, because it's not sustainable. Kinetic approach to taking out them is not sustainable. You have to find a way to integrate them into the agricultural production, and they see a different way of making more resources, revenue, and being self-reliant on that, because the major problem. Yes, it's just a major problem, but the approach has to change. And that brings to the part of the traditional rulers in the communities, district heads, this layer of people, they are critical because every traditional ruler and district head has an idea of who the stranger is in the community. In fact, if you want to cut off the issue of insecurity and banditry and in the farms and take it out, hold the traditional rulers accountable.
Really?
It's a mandate.
Wow.
Hold them accountable.
This is a perspective
they
I
are
had
more
not
effective.
before.
Nobody takes about these things, but we'll look at more realistic perspective because we've been in the field. We've worked with these people for years and years and we know what's existing, right? I was, of course, I moved out of my farm in Katsina State because of banditry. So I'm a major...
And you believe that the traditional rulers in that place could have been better, could have done better in curbing it?
To a great extent, I would say that, in collaboration with the security agencies, but the impact of the traditional rulers in managing their communities is really, really stronger than because you're just going to use force. And most of the force is compromised. You'll find out that most of the security agencies are even complicit in the areas of banditry, and we have it's on record. We know that a lot of security agencies have been caught supplying security arms and ammunition to the people, to the bandits. I'm not saying something that is unfounded. It's been on the news from Bona. A lot of them have been arrested and prosecuted. So engage the traditional rulers to become responsible to providing immediate solutions in sorting out the insecurity in our farms and erasing the issue of banditry. And you start seeing that results will come. Hold them accountable.
Right.
You understand? And that's what this president is doing, is he will tell you, be accountable for your region, be accountable for your state, be accountable for your community, be accountable. People should be held accountable. We don't just wear very heavy, regalias and then, with the royalty and charisma and aura that comes with it when your communities are unsafe and can't produce food.
We could do this longer. There's so much to still address, but thank you for putting things into perspective, and I hope the government is indeed listening. We've been discussing with Promise Amaha, President, Young Farmers Network, and we've been talking about federal government's food plan. Appraising the federal government's food plan. We will go for another short break right now, and then there's another interview for you, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.